A lot of people are talking about Elden Ring, and on this fabulous day, I'd like to do the same. Just so you know, I will be talking about version 1.04 of the game, which buffed colossal greatswords, nerfed swarm of flies, and changed up a lot of spells. With that, let's get into it. A lot of people have complained that a lot of the bosses are used multiple times, and I personally don't find that to be an issue. The game is just fun, the same way Halo is fun, so even if they're reskinned enemies, the game is better with those enemies in it, because more enemies gives you more fun. And I don't share the viewpoint that fighting an enemy multiple times makes it less valuable. People have said that it's just Dark Souls again, but I disagree, because I feel like these bosses were clearly designed with summons in mind, where there was less of a focus on that in the other games. I know some people don't like to use summons, but if you don't in this game, you're kneecapping yourself for no reason. There's really no benefit to not using them. You get the exact same amount of experience points, and the boss's health does not increase if you summon. It's been said that even though George R.R. Martin was involved, and they heavily promoted his involvement, the story isn't good, and I couldn't disagree more. In my opinion, the game has by far the best story of any Souls game. The story with Radigan and Marika is great. Ranella's heartbreak and descent has George written all over it. The Pyrrhic victory between Radahn and Melina reminds me of the War of Five Kings from Game of Thrones. And look, I see people debating who is stronger out of Big M and the General pretty much every day, and it's Radahn, objectively. Radahn declared war on the stars and won. Then there's the Night of the Black Knives and the mystery of what exactly happened that fateful evening, including a fan theory that Ranni sent the Black Knives to kill Marika, but Marika wasn't there, so they had to kill Godwyn instead, since Ranni's body had already been killed. There's also a fan theory that Godwyn and Marika had an incestuous relationship, and that's why Morgad and Mohg were born omens. Then Godfrey found out about it, and that's why he was banished. And it could also be why Melina and her brother were born cursed. Another thing, what did Gideon read that terrified him so much? There's so much epicness to the story and so much mystery at the same time. I love it. I also saw a theory online that every message written on the ground was created by George himself, and I can verify that that's 100% true. I also see people wanting Melina nerfed, and I think a slight nerf is in order, but I don't want anything major. Because, do you know how fun it is to put a summon sign outside of her arena and just fight her with randoms for like 3 hours? Everyone starts off super confident, and then she jumps in the air, and we run like Godric the Grafted. Like schoolgirls when there's a cute boy coming down the hallway, and we like him, but we don't want him to know that. Like George R.R. Martin when he's asked about the Winds of Winter. It's hilarious. And without her completely broken water duck move, a lot of the fun I've had with this game would be gone. And if she wasn't so hard, the legend of Let Me Solo Her would never have even been born. But it is nonsense that Melina heals even when you block her attack. The problem with patching a boss, though, is that sometimes you mess it up worse, like when they nerfed Radahn and nerfed him too much, and like when they applied the most recent patch, which has led to Melina healing automatically sometimes, as well as some bosses dying when they hit their second phase. And with that, I'm going to get into my major issues with the game. I think Elden Beast is a terrible boss fight, because I spend half my time chasing him. Same with Fire Giant, but it is a bit better because at least I have my faithful horsey. Navigating the terrain in some areas is a disaster. I can look up a map online or look at my own map and see something that's about 2 seconds away from me, then spend the next 15 minutes trying to figure out a way to get to it, and during that time, I'm not having fun. In fact, usually I'm having a terrible time because I can see where I want to go, I just can't go there. The game has air currents to boost your horsey up. They could have easily put some in certain spots, but they chose not to. And sometimes you have to complete a quest to get to a certain location, but if you view it on the map, it looks like any other area. And if this was the summer of 2004, I would love spending a bunch of time to solve the mystery of how to get to a ledge 10 feet away. I really would. The problem is, like most of you, I'm technically an adult, and I have a limited amount of time to play. And this issue turns the game from having a gameplay loop similar to Halo to having a loop similar to looking for my car keys, which is just frustration that slowly builds up over time. But if I find my car keys, I can go somewhere fun, sometimes for the whole day. When I finally get to the mini dungeons, a lot of times, I clear it in a few minutes. So the effort to get to it, a lot of the time, isn't worth the payoff. And if the terrain is going to remain this way in future games or DLCs, I think the way to fix it is consolidation. If Elden Ring only had 3 or 4 super mega side dungeons with loot on each floor, I wouldn't be unhappy. Final Fantasy XV, for all its flaws, had one of the best secret dungeons of all time, and if Elden Ring had the legacy dungeons, and then only one dungeon of that caliber, it'd be awesome. Or if you fixed the terrain and kept the dungeons like they are, it'd be awesome. Some of them are quite cool. Gelmer Hero's Grave was a nightmarish roller coaster, but when I finally beat it, I felt very accomplished. The dungeon where there's an endless fight between Radahn and Melina's forces is also very cool, and the Divine Tower of Caelid is amazing. People complain about the platforming in FromSoft's games, and they should, but I thought it was great in this case, and you even get a nice little boss at the bottom. Gee, I wonder if he'll show up later. But some of the other mini dungeons don't need to exist, especially when they can be such a pain to get to. I think something that would help with navigation would be a 3D map to show which location on the map is at which level of terrain. Metroid Prime had a multi-layered map to deal with this issue in 2002. I don't know why Elden Ring and Skyrim and any other open world game don't just use what already works. Some of the Metroid maps even show which areas you can't get to with your current gear, or areas you can get to but are unsafe, and I would unironically pay $10 for a feature like that in Elden Ring, or I would have on my first playthrough. Certain individuals have complained Bloodhound's step is broken in PvP, and they're completely correct. If FromSoft can't find an effective way to nerf it, I don't see a reason why they can't just remove it from PvP entirely. I'll also say that I wish Covenants were still around, so PvP had more of a sense of progression to it. And I honestly had more fun doing the Volcano Manor assassination contracts than I did fighting other players. But data miners have found a location where it looks like duels will take place in the future, so whenever that gets patched or sold as DLC, I'll give it another go. Right after the assassination of Lincoln, when I was still on New Game, I heard about how good Rivers of Blood was, tried to get it, and discovered that I was completely screwed because I had the audacity to kill the boss in the area. Missable content in a game, in my opinion, is not ideal, but it is at times understandable. But as far as I know, there's really no story-related reason that invading NPCs should seemingly kill themselves when I defeat an area boss, especially since I still get NPC invasions in Limgrave after defeating Godric, so it's not even consistent. Speaking of consistency, it also throws me off that you randomly can't summon for certain bosses. It's kind of annoying because I don't know why I suddenly can't use a useful tool. Not knowing why a narrative event happened can be very cool, but having gameplay mechanics be abruptly taken away without any sort of notification is different. Next thing, it's extremely frustrating when my horse dies and I get stunned for around 92 minutes. It's borderline absurd and makes me not even want to use it for certain fights. Half the time I get hit, take damage, fall down, take damage again, now I'm dead. It turns 2 hit kills into 1 hit kills, and 1 hit kills suck. Trying to summon a new horsey in battle is also terrible. You have to tab over to the horse icon, press it, you get a notification, then you have to tab over to yes, because the default is no for some reason, and you're supposed to do all that while avoiding attacks from whatever killed the horse in the first place. To make matters worse, you can see on the quick select menu when it's going to cost you a flask to get your horsey back, so no notification is even needed. It also annoys me that I can't upgrade Torrent, although this is a much smaller issue. The Divine Towers, except for the Caelid one, are a missed opportunity. These can be frantic battles to the top, or have in-depth puzzles, or they could be difficult to get to, or mysterious, but instead it's nothing. You just ride to the top, with no resistance and get your rune activated. The only thing the towers did was just add walk time to the game. People have theorized that originally there was more to it, but the content was cut, and that's probably true. But at the same time, if it's not in the game, it's not in the game. The Rise locations, like Heretic's Rise, are a little better. Walking across the invisible bridge, like back in Cease Cave, is awesome and very tense. I know some people hate that section, but I like it, and it adds to the sense of adventure in Dark Souls, but I'm going to talk about Dark Souls 1 and all the others in a separate video. But anyway, the other Rise locations are all like, LOL, find 3 turtles, which is okay, the first time. I also spent 15 minutes looking for a turtle, only to look online and see that you have to interact with the little statue thing again for no reason, or the turtle may not even show up. And the rises that aren't about dogs are like summon an imp and let it fight another imp, which isn't really a puzzle. Then another one was a random NPC quest, which I don't really mind. I assume the turtle thing will get patched, but it's still repetitive content, and people like to dunk on Skyrim for being shallow, and it is. However, some of the puzzles in Skyrim are better than these puzzles. Besides Turtle Dude, I also encountered some other bugs, like the game crashing. One time a tree spirit hit me so hard my button input stopped working. But getting on that bad is kind of funny, so I'm really not that pressed about it. But I also get a notification that says, failed to load save data every time I'm disconnected from the online servers. I can easily quit the game, then go back in, and it fixes it, but I didn't know that the first time, and there was a moment of sheer panic. Upon launch, the game was also bugged to the point where you couldn't even finish certain NPC quests, so I'm both shocked and not shocked at all that reviewers still gave it 10s when you couldn't even complete all the content in the game. It's around 2 months after release, and they just patched Patch's storyline, so I'm both disappointed that the game got a free pass for launching in the state that it did, especially with the issues that some PC players have had to deal with, and very curious as to what the game will look like in about a year. Some people have acted like the game is terrible because it reuses assets and animations, when to me that's par for the course with modern games, and there are much worse examples out there. If I'm remembering correctly, every diner in 15 had the same layout and same NPCs, and if I'm being blunt, if they reskinned every boss that has been in the Souls series up until now and let me fight them with Elden Ring mechanics, I wouldn't be unhappy. But I get that certain people would think it's a sign of laziness from the devs, so I just think we have fundamentally different viewpoints on the topic. And that's fine. I'm not trying to personally insult them, I just disagree with their viewpoint. Next up, these fucking worthless degenerates have claimed that the world of Elden Ring is empty, but it isn't. No, seriously though. Ubisoft and other companies just fill their open worlds with so much filler nonsense. Elden Ring seems empty by comparison. If you look at the map, there are structures quite literally everywhere, and if you ever think you've done everything you can do in the game, you probably haven't. Like I mentioned earlier, if any changes need to be made to Elden Ring's open world, it doesn't need more stuff on the map, it needs less stuff, with more depth to it. The Witcher 3 does not have an overwhelming amount of side quests, but the side quests it does have are fairly deep and typically have multiple outcomes. And that kind of layered approach is what I'd like to see with all the dungeons in Elden Ring. Another issue that's been brought up is the amount of XP that you get from different monsters seems unbalanced, and I couldn't agree more. I'm on New Game Plus 7, and I basically run past all common enemies and the majority of field bosses because the time spent fighting them just isn't worth the XP they give me at this point. The Bell-Bearing Hunter is fun to fight, but very difficult and gives very little XP. So on New Game Plus cycles, I find myself going to fight the Deathrite Bird instead, even though I think he's annoying. So the game is making me choose between fun or decent XP, and that shouldn't be a choice I have to make. Next issue, I know fall damage isn't random, but it feels random, and gravity has killed me more than anything else in Elden Ring. Maybe this is a dumb question, but Is there a reason why the game needs fall damage for areas that I already have access to? I guess I'm just not understanding why it's even there, or how having less fall damage could possibly diminish the amount of fun involved. Because as it is, the combination of fall damage and the terrain makes Elden Ring, an open world game, feel very constrained, and I don't like that. Moving on, I saw a video a player made of those spirit archers shooting at them, and their arrow clearly curved to hit them. It's not the end of the world, but I personally hate homing attacks because they feel unfair. From Software knows how to make enemies that are challenging at range, but not ridiculous, so I don't know why things like this are included. No one likes it, and no one asked for it. Hey Mark, you gonna get the new Souls game? I don't believe so, Johnny. Why? Well, I heard there were no homing attacks, and I just can't support that. It's an ethical thing. I hate you, Mark. I also have an issue with the way co-op works. Like I said before, fighting Malenia with cooperators is very fun, but once we get into phase 2, the host will randomly decide to run in and die, about 70% of the time. I don't know if they get overconfident, or they want to feel like they still beat the boss even though they summoned help, but I would really like it if one person dying didn't end the whole match. Next thing, I think there should be more unique areas in the game. For example, everyone loves Windmill Village because it's wacky and intriguing. The only problem with it is because it exists, it made me think how a lot of the other areas in the game are kind of bland by comparison. Limgrave is fairly generic plains, but it does have the dudes on crosses that yell, so that's cool. Caelid is a barren nightmare, but it does have the Divine Tower that I like. Liurnia, Mountaintop of the Giants, Consecrated Snowfield, Form Azula, the place where Moog hangs out, and the Haligtree are all less intriguing by comparison. And Deathroot Depths, in my opinion, is genuinely horrible and doesn't need to exist. I don't remember there being any new enemy types down there, and navigating the terrain was a horrific nightmare. And unfortunately, it's not just me having issues with it, because I see the bloodstains from people falling, and it's made all the more frustrating by the fact that we are falling from heights that would barely hurt you in a lot of other games. I played the first level in Tiny Tina's Wonderland, or whatever it's called, and I was scared to death to drop down in the tutorial because Elden Ring has programmed me to think that any fall might kill me. And that's sad. Elden Ring is literally giving me PTSD when I play other games. Lake of Rod, on the other hand, hell yeah, dude. It's a secret in-game area that feels like a secret in-game area, like I'm trespassing and not supposed to be there. My only complaint about it is how small it is compared to some of the other areas, especially Limgrave, since, as I said, it's a grassy field with not much going on. And it doesn't have enough bosses, with only one boss physically located in the Lake of Rod. And that's a boss I'd already fought. Nokron, or the Eternal City, is pretty cool though, and it almost feels like a Bloodborne location. There's also some cool stuff going on with the NPCs. Patch's teleporting away if you summon him for the Radahn fight is fantastic and fits perfectly with his persona. Alexander's a cool dude. Some of the soldiers eating each other is also cool. The Jerk at Stormvale Castle quite literally stalking you is cool. And Gideon having new attacks based off whether or not you told him about those attacks is very cool. Next, I had a certain point in every Souls game where I just become OP, and I've accepted that because I like grinding. It's repetitive, it's calming, and seeing those stats go up gives me the happiness I was born without. The problem is in Elden Ring, you are going to outlevel the early game bosses very quickly, then the items they drop and the XP they give become basically useless most of the time, even on New Game Plus cycles. Joseph Anderson said in his video that it'd be helpful to have an option that could scale bosses up to your level if you wanted to do that. Personally, I think players should just get a slider and you can make the bosses whatever level you want. So for instance, you could have a level 500 Malenia and she self-heals if you breathe while playing the game. She also has 5 phases, and phase 5 takes 10 years to beat. Hire me, FromSoft. Another thing I would like in the game is different modes, completely separate from the open world. You could have a mode where you can fight a gang of different bosses, with bosses also on your side, or one where you can play as a boss, or a freestyle mode, where once you fight a boss in the single player, you can fight them again and give your character any stats you want. Level 99 intelligence? You got it, Chief. 99 strength? Of course. Oh, you want 55 ADP for no reason? Hell yeah, dude. Of course, you can also toggle the stats of the bosses you're fighting as well. Also, Dark Souls 2 is the best Dark Souls. Y'all just need to accept that. Also, what happened to Chalice Dungeons from Bloodborne? People hate on them for being samey, but I would love that feature in Elden Ring, because I want any excuse to play the game more. It's a fun game, and at its core, that's all games really have to be. People might say that the game doesn't need all those extra modes, but my perspective on it is, what could it hurt? This game got 10s, and Halo 3 got 10s. And in terms of different game modes, Halo 3 puts Elden Ring to shame. I get that the genres are completely different, but I still think Halo 3 is a good example of what a 10 looks like. I took a break and I thought of some more minor issues because I have no life. I'm going to go through them in a rapid fire sort of way. I feel like they could have done more with New Game Plus. Dark Souls 2, the best Dark Souls, added in some items and I think a few new invaders. So there was at the very least a reason to play New Game Plus 1 and Plus 2. Bonfire aesthetics would also be a dream come true in this game. I have no idea why they introduced such a convenient concept, then dropped it after one game. It's like people on the internet criticized Dark Souls 2, and FromSoft completely misunderstood that criticism and took away the wrong things. Hashtag bring back ADP. Not really, I kinda hate ADP. But bring back bonfire aesthetics. I only ever felt the need to craft something one time, and I believe that more of an effort should have been made to integrate crafting into the game. Maybe there could be a survival mode where you straight up don't get a flask, and can only get healing items, or any items, through crafting. What about if there's a legendary sword, or a legendary spell, and you need these very exotic crafting materials to get it? And maybe that could be what's at the Divine Towers. Or maybe it could be even more secret than that. I also never used the Flask of Wondrous Physic in any of my playthroughs, and I honestly forgot about it until writing this. I understand why I can't use my map when there are enemies nearby, but instead of stopping me from using it completely, why not just have it be a thing where I can open it at any time, but if I get hit, that's on me? Because half the time when the game won't let me use it, the enemies aren't even anywhere near me, and I'm at no risk of dying. There's another common complaint about Elden Ring that I almost didn't even talk about because it's been discussed to death. But that complaint, of course, is difficulty and lack of accessibility. Because would it really be the launch of a new Souls game without people wanting to change the game for everyone because they can't beat it? First off, accessibility and difficulty are two different things. Games should have accessibility modes for people that are deaf, people that are blind, people that have one hand. Anything like that I'm absolutely in favor of. Why would I not be? But difficulty is a totally different thing. But let me break it down. To get to Millennia, you have to light 4 torches. While you light those torches, you get harassed by invisible enemies, borderline molested. But there's a merchant who sells you a torch that allows you to see those invisible enemies. But there's a catch. You have to have a certain level of faith to effectively wield the torch. But if you don't have the faith requirement, the torch will still work, even though it shouldn't, to let you see those invisible enemies. In other words, the game breaks its own rules to help you. Elden Ring is not out to get you. It wants you to succeed and gives you the tools to succeed, and you will succeed if you're patient. That's why the Serpent Hunter's sword to kill Rickard is in his boss arena. That's why there's a way to make friendly NPCs that go hostile, non-hostile again, in case you make them mad. And on top of all that, your health does not decrease when you die, like Demon Souls and Dark Souls 2. So it's safe to say this game could be way meaner if it wanted to be, and it chooses not to be. In fact, stakes of Marika have been added to make the game easier. And critics of the game's difficulty have pretty much ignored that. It's also pretty well known within the community that certain builds are basically easy mode, and those same people have ignored that as well. Another thing, when you fight an NPC invader, they try to heal even when they are out of Estus, which gives you at least one guaranteed opening. Then if you ever get to a point in the game where you're stuck, you can fairly easily respec, and that option is presented to you fairly early on. So, I'm tired of hearing about the game being too hard. It's not too hard. People make videos about this game like it fucked their girlfriends, and it didn't. In fact, if Elden Ring was a maiden simulator, there would be notes from the game, notes from other players, tools, equipment, and gear, all specifically designed to help you get your very own maiden. I want to repeat myself here. I really wish I could level up Torrent, because this horse cannot stay alive. Radagon's holy attack where he hits the ground has a little too much range on it, and it can feel a bit ridiculous. I've seen repeated criticism that the game falls down a few pegs after the capital. I disagree, and I think Consecrated Snowfield is great due to the sheer amount of content and optional bosses the relatively small area has. Beastman Clergyman's boss arena sucks. There's a completely needless space right as you walk in that has killed my mimic, and he also frequently hits me through the pillars, which is extremely annoying. I really miss the way they handed out XP in the late game Chalice Dungeons from Bloodborne. At times, it almost felt like they were giving me too many blood echoes. But a trade-off to that is it led to me feeling incentivized to play pretty much every unique dungeon. It led to me feeling powerful, and it led to me always feeling like playing was well worth my time. I also think in addition to doing nothing new, New Game Plus mode is inconvenient, or at the very least can be made to be more convenient. I have to do things like interact with the thorns of the capital every time, so my maiden can appear and tell me I can't penetrate the non-penetratable thorns, which I'm already aware of. There's also no need for her to tell me how to level up on a New Game Plus, but I still have to rest at that one particular side of grace so she can tell me every time. I also have to take a horse over most of Liurnia to get to the Glenstone Key each time, and it's not fun. I already got that, so I should already have that. I keep all my weapons, why would I not keep the key? I also think at least some sites of grace should remain activated on the map so I can zoom through things as quickly as I want as a reward for beating the game. Next, Sir Gideon really needs to be buffed. He's a very cool character, but I can kill him before he gets one attack off, and I'm not good at the game. I also think Millennia's homing bloom attack that starts off her second phase hums in on me a little too well for my taste, and it feels like she's cheesing me. I mean, I guess I deserve it for the bosses that I've cheesed, but still, I want to be a powerful gamer. A lot, and I mean a lot, of people have complained about the delayed attacks, but I think they have a point. A certain satisfaction comes from dodging a flurry of attacks. There's almost like a rhythm to it, and delayed attacks mess with that rhythm. I get the point of it, to increase difficulty, but it also decreases fun. So I hope in the future FromSoft finds a different way to increase difficulty. A lot of people have also complained about the Godskin duo fight, and on that, I don't really understand what the fuss is about. It's definitely not as good as Ornstein and Smo, or even as good as fighting the two pursuers in Dark Souls 2, or as good as fighting the throne people in Dark Souls 2. But it's not the end of the world. You can even summon the Requisite guy from Volcano Manor to help you out. Music for the most part is grand as usual, but it isn't really my thing this time around. I really enjoy Majula, Gwen, Microlash, and Maiden Estrella themes, and nothing really stuck out to me as much in this game. I do really like Elden Ring, but I also think it's got a lot of room for improvement before it actually becomes a 10 out of 10 perfect game. I saw one YouTuber compare it to Mario 64. It's not Mario 64, and it's not on that same level, because it's just not that groundbreaking. I would argue it's not even the best game in the Souls series, because that would be Bloodborne. But my main hope, wish, plea, desire is that there's some sort of patch that makes XP scale better on New Game Plus cycles, and makes the experience feel more even-handed in general. and that something is done with fall damage, but that's not going to happen. Overall, I'd give the Soul series a 9.7 out of 10. And if I had to rate Elden Ring, I'd probably give it something between a 0 and a 10.